All right. What is going on, everyone? This is Bope here with our latest draft league venture. We have been brought up to the BBR-D League. For anyone that's unfamiliar with the BBR, it's the Bregex Battle Royale, their D League, pretty much made for up-and-coming Wi-Fi creators. That gives us a chance not only to work on bettering our own content, but also allows for an opportunity to join up to the main division. This is our first time in the BBR. We've competed in the BBR Summer Scramble before. I believe we made it either to top 16 or top 32 cut this past summer, which is pretty good. It means we got through the pool round, and we were able to win at least one of our normal brackets. But that's aside from the point. We're just going to be going over the draft from the D League. Just before we get into it, I just want to thank the admins for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to playing against a group of coaches that, for the most part, I am either just unfamiliar with or I just haven't been able to play against, and that's always cool for me. I'd rather get some new experiences, and it also just means that not only I get to play new people and get new challenges, but I also just get exposed to their content as well as and just to know them a little bit more, which is pretty cool. But let's get into the draft. This time around, the D League was open to 18 different teams, which means more scarcity on certain roles and certain types that you really don't have a prevalence of in Paldea decks, even with the expansions. In addition, we were using the Terra rules from Summer Scramble, which, if you're unfamiliar there, it's pretty much just high tier Terra with like a few bans, mostly just at the top of the leaderboard, stuff that could be deemed broken. Stuff that comes to mind is like Terra Latias and things like Palafin, and things that are super broken. There were still some really good stuff at the top of the board. Terra Torn, Zarude, Raging Bolt comes to mind because I used Raging Bolt in Summer Scramble myself. We were the 14th overall pick. Main thing that I was looking for is either something super broken that's left from the Terra Captains, or just something that I hadn't used before in this gen, which Greninja fits perfectly into. It's something that fits into a lot of niches that I do like, something that's over the base 120 speed limit, especially something that's one of the more powerful stuff in the tiers. If you can have something above 115, above 120, that's really clutch. It means that you've got speed tiers kind of unlocked. You only have to add like maybe 1-2 things over base 100 for the rest of the draft, which is just the way I look at it. Gives us spikes, it gives us T spikes, obviously 2 great abilities with Protean and Battle Bond. Just going into the rest of the draft, I wanted to make sure that I can build a team that can support both types, or both abilities, and just make sure I am not just pigeonholed into trying to use a WinCon Gren every week. If I can use a Protean Breaker, that would be huge. Also has U-turn, just really good coverage. It's a really good mon. I haven't been able to use the new battle mod mechanic yet, so I'm really excited for that. I honestly don't know if I've used Gren in Draft League before, to be honest, with either of its 2 abilities. I think the only time I've used it was just Torrent, when Gen 7 was kind of toying around with what was legal, what was not. Round 2 came around. I was trying to figure out what kind of Terra Captain I wanted to use. The 2 things that were really coming to mind were Terra Iron Boulder and Terra Chi-Yu. We ended up going with Chi-Yu, and I used Boulder in a league pretty recently, so I was familiar with Boulder, but I wanted to try out Chi-Yu for the second time this gen, this time with Terra. Chi-Yu is really good, and it's one of the more prominent breakers at the top of the tiers. 135 base special attack, and really good stabs with fire and dark. Adding a Terra type to that not only allows us to just add to our coverage, which isn't really phenomenal. It has Psychic. Obviously, it's 2 stabs. You can break stuff down, especially defensive walls, with Ruination. But you want to be able to have something that just assist with dealing with things like bulky waters, bulky fairies come to mind as well. Just anything that's a real special defensive wall that Chiyu isn't able to deal with. But it's going to be an absolute nuke. Having the ability to click Terrafire Overheat, even with specs or not, is really clutch. This mon's going to be really cool to use. Something else that I've recently tried out, but it still fit the mold pretty well, and I was really surprised it made it into round 3, was Iron Hands. Iron Hands is just a really good Pokemon in general. Its bulk is phenomenal, and it allows just for additional pressure onto things like steel types that Greninja isn't able to break easily. It also means that fairy types have to prep for not only Iron Hands and trying to help deal with that. If it's prepping for Iron Hands, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily dealing for Gren. So say I'm dealing with like a Florges or something, doesn't want to run Fizz Def to kind of be a switch into Iron Hands and deal with stuff like Heavy Slam and a normal Electric Stab, or is it able to switch into Gren? That's kind of the decision that I wanted to create there. Has Volt Switch, just another pivot around Chiyu and Gren is really nice. I don't want to have Gren pigeonholed into including U-Turn into its 4 move slots, especially if I'm trying to run a win concept. I didn't have any rockers yet, so that's where Glimmora came in. I have not used Glimmora again, just trying to try out new things that work with my playstyle. In addition, I ended up going with stuff that I've used a ton in the later rounds, aka the next round of Azumarill. But talking about Glimmora specifically, it was one of the few poison types that were left on the board that I thought were worth an earlier round pick. I thought a poison type would be really nice here, just with what I mentioned. Fairy types are tough to deal with the first 3 months. Does provide some sort of removal with Mortal Spin. It's not guaranteed, obviously, because steel types can't block that, but it has really good coverage. It can be ran offensively with like Meteor Beam sets and set up with Rock Polish, but can also be ran as a lead a little bit defensively. It just has to avoid ground type hits. But Glimmora is really cool. It fits into a speed tier that it didn't have in the 80s, so that was nice as well. We go over to Azumarill. I was not planning on using Azumarill because I had Swampert in mind, which is our next round pick, but I wanted to use Azumarill literally just because I thought it was on the board way too late, and it's one of the best fairy types in the format. It shouldn't be there. Yes, I'm gonna end up having 3 water types, but honestly, I think they all serve different purposes, and I genuinely think they're not going to overlap with each other. Azumarill is a great AV user. It has great stabs in Water and Fairy, allows for Belly Drum setup, has good priority with Aqua Jet, is a really good band user if needed. It's just not an easy Pokemon to one-hit KO, and it deals out a ton of damage that's going to be really essential in helping both Chiyu and Greninja set up for late game just win cons in general. Again, just wanted to grab a fairy type. If I'm not going to grab a fairy type like Azumarill, I don't know how much I would have valued a fairy, even though I have a fairy later on the board as well. I went with Swampert next. I talked about already having Swampert in mind when I picked up Glimmora. I just wanted a solid ground type that assists Iron Hands with just being another physically defensive Pokemon for our defensive backbone. It has really good utility with Flip Turn. It has Rocks. It has Roars to get out any setup users. I don't think I've used Swampert in draft before, which is kind of crazy to think about, just with how prevalent Swampert's been for the last couple gens, just being as a consistent middle tier Pokemon. But it's one of my favorite starters, and I'm really excited to use it. I think it has mostly defensive merits, but you can run it offensively if you're thinking like someone's really ground weak and running like a Scarf set or something. It does have merits to it, and it is relatively strong, so I think Swampert's going to be really cool to try out. Next thing I really I really need a steel type. And even though I'm not in love with Skarmory, I do think it's going to serve its purposes pretty well. A flying type is really nice as well, because so far I didn't have any immunities to ground. So having a steel type and it doesn't have a ground weakness is pretty clutch. Another rocks and spikes user, so I've got 3 on the team already, 4 if you do want to include Greninja there. Obviously, Iron Defense Body Press sets are pretty prevalent to just work with its physically defensive prowess. But honestly, I just think Skarmory, with the utility that it does provide, plus it's just it covers a little bit of the weaknesses of both Swampert and Iron Hands. It's a good switch into fairies and psychics that Iron Hands doesn't want to deal with, and grasses that Swampert doesn't want to deal with, and both of those don't mind eating up fire and electric hits, so they kind of pair in a decently symbiotic way. Whimsicott is next. Whimsicott honestly filled up a lot of boxes for me for a lower tier fairy, but honestly its grass typing was mainly what I went for. Again, I just wanted another check 2 ground types, and even though Whimsicott isn't a physically defensive Pokemon in any sense of the way, it does have ways to deal with that. Prankster is very nice to have. The 116 base speed is very nice as well. Pairing up with Gren, it's the 2 mons that I have over base 110, which is nice, along with Chi-Yu at base 100. And just having another fairy type on the team is really nice. I used 2 fairies in one of my more recent leagues, and I believe it was Pheasantipity, and I'm honestly gonna check just so I'm not talking randomly here. It was Pheasantipity. I can't even find it right now, but that's fine. I honestly found another league where I used 2 fairies, and it was Valiant plus Tinkaton, because Valiant you don't use Valiant for its fairy typing. Like, it's obviously nice for its offensive prowess, but you want to have kind of a defensive fairy type as well. So I think between Azu and Whimsicott, they can both serve those purposes, which is nice. And yeah, we'll talk about Rotom lastly. Again, it was just to help improve a little bit of a ground weakness, but it does fill a lot of niches. A ghost type is really nice to have as a spin blocker. Its speed tier was really nice, the utility of providing Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave to the team as well. Solid enough bulk. It's obviously not as bulky as its forms, but it was something that fit into the lower tiers here that I just thought it didn't collide with Iron Hands too much on their electric typings. I don't think Hands really gains too much from its electric type. If anything, it just makes it a little bit of a deterrent. Obviously, it does have some resistances it's added to it with electric, but I don't think those two collide with each other too much using the electric type. Alright, so that is going to be it for the draft analysis here. If you made it to the end of the video, if you want to give it a thumbs up, or if you want to leave a comment down below, if you want to say a nice thing about my dog Bo here, show me that you got to the end of the video, that would be pretty cool. You can say something nice about Bo, or say something mean about me. I think both are appreciated and well warranted. But that is the end of this one. We will see you in week 1 when we're taking on Pup and their South Bend Snowflakes. So that's going to be really exciting here. And yeah, we will see you in the next one. Peace.